Clark Gable's own daughter was raised as an adopted child, while Ingrid Bergman's forbidden affair sparked sermons from the Vatican. These weren't roles or some other planned scandal. They were secrets the studios buried. Today, we unveil 17 stars whose hidden romances left behind children Hollywood never wanted the world to see. Number 1. Clark Gable, the king who denied his own blood. The king of Hollywood lit up the screen in Gone with the Wind. But in private, his brightest secret was hidden in plain sight. Behind the mustache and the smirk, Clark Gable carried a scandal the studio machine swore would never reach the front page. A daughter was born with his eyes, his jawline, and yet he never dared call her his own. By the 1930s, Gable was MGM's crown jewel. The gossip columns hailed him as the king, pairing him with Carole Lombard in Love and with Vivien Leigh on screen. But in 1935, while filming Call of the Wild with Loretta Young, an affair sparked. The set was bitter cold, but their off-camera nights burned hotter than any script. When Young discovered she was pregnant, panic set in. The Hays Code had just tightened its grip, and MGM could not risk their leading man being branded an adulterer. Loretta disappeared on a mysterious vacation, only to return months later with a newly adopted baby girl. The press bought the story. Fans sent congratulations, and little Judy Lewis grew up believing she was an orphan welcomed by a kind actress. But the Mirror told another truth. Strangers whispered, "She looks just like Clark." Even Judy herself noticed the familiar cleft in her chin, a feature Gable could never hide. For decades, Hollywood insiders traded the rumor like contraband. Hedda Hopper wrote blind items. Studio bosses tightened contracts. Gable, meanwhile, played Rhett Butler in 1939, his most iconic role, while quietly crossing streets to avoid his daughter's gaze. In 1955, when Judy married, she invited him to the wedding. He arrived, shaken, sat in silence, and left before anyone could ask questions. It was the only time father and daughter ever truly met. Clark Gable died in 1960, just months before his posthumous son with Kay Williams was born. Yet Judy remained the ghost of his past, the secret child never acknowledged in his lifetime. Hollywood crowned him its king, but even kings can abandon their heirs. Number 2. Ingrid Bergman, the love affair that rocked the Vatican. It began not with applause, but with condemnation from the pulpit. In 1950, priests thundered from church steps, U.S. senators denounced her name, and one of Hollywood's most luminous stars was branded a sinner before the world. Ingrid Bergman, the angelic face of Casablanca, had committed the ultimate betrayal, not on screen, but in life. She had fallen in love with another man while still married, and the child that followed would exile her from the very industry that once adored her. By the mid-1940s, Bergman was untouchable. Audiences worshipped her as Ilse Lund beside Humphrey Bogart, and studios like MGM and Selznick International treated her as their golden investment. But during the filming of Stromboli in Italy, she began an affair with its director, Roberto Rossellini. The volcanic landscape on screen mirrored the scandal erupting off it. When Bergman's pregnancy became impossible to hide, whispers leapt from photoplay to the Senate floor. Senator Edwin Johnson even called her a powerful influence for evil, an extraordinary rebuke for a woman once hailed as Hollywood's purest saint. Her American husband, Dr. Peter Lindstrom, refused to grant her a quiet divorce. The press feasted on the drama. A doctor scorned, a Catholic actress carrying a director's child, and a baby whose very existence mocked the iron grip of Hollywood's morality code. In 1950, Bergman gave birth in Rome to her son, Roberto, while America slammed its doors. The Academy that had awarded her an Oscar for Gaslight now acted as if she were erased. For nearly a decade, Bergman lived in exile, making films in Europe, while the Vatican's disapproval and Washington's outrage lingered like smoke. Only in 1956 did she return, triumphant, with Anastasia and another Academy Award, as though Hollywood had suddenly remembered her worth. Yet the scars remained. She had been banished not for crime, but for love and for daring to keep a child born outside studio-approved boundaries. Hollywood once crowned her its angel, then it cast her as its outcast. And the greatest irony? The role that ruined her was not scripted at all. It was her heart choosing love over legend. Number 3. Charlie Chaplin. The courtroom that tried to bury him. The laughter stopped the moment the courtroom doors slammed shut. In 1944, Charlie Chaplin, the man who made the world weep with city lights and modern times, found himself staring down a jury, accused not of art, but of fatherhood. At the center of the storm stood a baby girl with his unmistakable features and a young actress who refused to stay silent. By then, Chaplin was already a legend. His little tramp character had survived the transition from silent film to talkies, and audiences across America adored him as the clown with soulful eyes. But off-screen, his appetite for romance was as famous as his bowler hat. Enter Joan Barry, a struggling actress he had taken under his wing in the early 1940s. Their affair was brief, tempestuous, and by 1943, she was pregnant. Chaplin denied he was the father, yet the whispers grew louder. Had Hollywood's greatest comic left behind a child, he wouldn't claim. The trial was a media circus. Gossip columnist Hedda Hopper covered every glance, every whispered testimony. The FBI even dusted off the Mann Act, accusing Chaplin of misconduct that threatened to ruin his reputation. Though he was acquitted of the criminal charges, the paternity case dragged on. In 1945, a jury declared him the father of Carol Ann Barry, despite blood tests that suggested otherwise. The verdict forced Chaplin to pay support, even as his lawyers insisted the evidence was flawed. But the damage was done. Once America's darling, Chaplin became a symbol of scandal. Studio executives distanced themselves. Politicians denounced him. Fans who once cheered in packed theaters now read headlines calling him immoral. By 1952, with pressure mounting and the Barry case still haunting his reputation, Chaplin left the United States altogether, seeking refuge in Switzerland. The cruelest irony? The man who gave the world laughter had his own life reduced to whispers in court corridors and scandal sheets. Hollywood once crowned him its greatest clown. The courtroom made him its tragic punchline. Number 4. Loretta Young, the saint with a hidden sin. She built her career playing virtuous women in soft lighting, halos practically etched onto the screen. But in 1935, Loretta Young carried a secret that could have ended her career overnight. Beneath the lace collars and angelic smile, the saint of Hollywood hid a child, the unspoken evidence of a forbidden affair with Clark Gable. By the mid-1930s, Young was already a starlet under contract, celebrated for her roles in The Crusades, and later destined for an Academy Award in The Farmer's Daughter, 1947. Off-screen, however, she was entangled in one of the most dangerous scandals the studio system could imagine. During the filming of Call of the Wild, 1935, sparks flew between her and MGM's leading man, Clark Gable. But when Loretta discovered she was pregnant, there was no script to save her. Hollywood in the 1930s had no tolerance for unwed motherhood. The studio orchestrated a cover story. Young vanished on a vacation, and months later, she returned with an adopted baby girl. That child was Judy Lewis, who grew up believing she was rescued, never knowing she was the daughter of two of Hollywood's brightest stars. The deception was meticulous, paperwork altered, whispers silenced, and even wardrobe choices tailored to deflect suspicion. But the truth leaked in the corners of gossip. People couldn't help but notice the child's dimpled chin, a mirror image of Gable's. For decades, Judy bore the weight of secrets she didn't understand. Even as a teenager, she endured cruel remarks about her resemblance to Gable, remarks her mother deflected with silence. It wasn't until Judy was in her 30s that she finally confronted Loretta. The answer came not with denial, but with weary confirmation. Yes, Clark was her father. Loretta Young lived to old age, admired for her elegance and dignity. Yet her greatest performance may have been the lifelong role of a mother, pretending to be merely an adoptive guardian. Hollywood praised her as a paragon of virtue. But behind the veil of saintliness was the irony of a woman who spent her life hiding the one role she played most honestly, that of a mother. Number 5. Errol Flynn, the playboy who couldn't outrun rumors. The parties never ended. They only shifted from yacht decks to courtroom benches. In the 1940s, while America's boys stormed the beaches of Europe, Hollywood's most dashing swashbuckler was battling whispers that his greatest adventures took place off-screen. Errol Flynn, the man who gave audiences Captain Blood and The Adventures of Robin Hood, became just as famous for the rumors that followed him as for the sword he swung on screen. And among those whispers were children he would never claim, lovers left behind, and scandals that no studio press release could fully erase. Flynn's rise was meteoric. By 1935, Warner Brothers had discovered their perfect leading man. Tall, reckless, with a grin that sold danger as charm. He lived his roles, whether dueling Basil Rathbone in Robin Hood, 1938, or sweeping Olivia de Havilland into his arms. Yet even as audiences adored him, insiders spoke of his secret life, affairs in exotic ports, sudden pregnancies, and hushed settlements meant to keep his adventures out of the gossip columns. Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons both hinted that Flynn's greatest role wasn't in Sherwood Forest, but in evading scandal. By the mid-1940s, the rumors sharpened. Whispers of illegitimate children trailed him across continents, from California to Cuba, from London to Jamaica. Some women claimed support, others vanished into silence. Flynn, ever the rogue, brushed off speculation with a wink, joking, "I like my women as I like my whiskey." Aged 12 years, a line that scandalized polite society and deepened the shadows around his name. Warner Brothers poured money into controlling the narrative, but the cracks in his heroic image widened. As the years wore on, the legend became more fragile. Flynn fled to the Caribbean, chasing business ventures that collapsed as quickly as his marriages. He drank too much, spent too freely, and left behind more questions than answers. When he died in 1959 at only 50, Hollywood mourned the screen idol, but whispered still about the children who might bear his unmistakable features. Errol Flynn carved his name into cinema history as a hero in green tights. But in life, he became a fugitive of his own reputation, a man who could outfight any villain on screen, yet never outrun the rumors in the dark. Number 6. Joan Crawford. The Adoption Files, Hollywood sealed. The papers were signed in secrecy, the ink barely dry before the whispers began. Joan Crawford, MGM's queen of melodrama, forever immortalized in Grand Hotel, 1932, and Mildred Pierce, 1945, was praised on screen as the ultimate mother figure. But behind closed doors, her own path to motherhood was anything but picture perfect. The children she brought into her home were wrapped in scandal, their adoptions raising more questions than answers. At the height of her fame in the 1930s, Crawford longed for the image of a complete family. Studios, ever mindful of publicity, knew that marriage and children could soften the edges of Hollywood's most ambitious star. Yet her adoption of Christina in 1940 was shrouded in mystery. California law at the time had barred Crawford, as a single woman, from adopting. But suddenly, paperwork appeared from Nevada, and a baby girl was delivered into the arms of a woman who wielded more influence than most politicians. The press celebrated a maternal triumph, while insiders whispered about the strings she pulled to make it happen. Then came more children: Christopher, Kathy, and Cindy. Each arrival prompted speculation. Were these truly legal adoptions? Or were some backroom deals struck to protect Crawford's carefully manicured image? MGM's publicity department churned out photographs of the star cradling infants like props, each shot designed to reinforce her perfect mother narrative. But in Hollywood, where nothing stayed buried, rumors spread that Crawford's children were not only adopted in questionable ways, but also pawns in her lifelong battle with loneliness and reputation. As the years passed, the myth unraveled. Christina Crawford would later publish her blistering memoir, Mommy Dearest, 1978, painting Joan not as a saintly mother, but as a tyrant whose maternal instincts were staged for cameras. Whether every claim was true or exaggerated, one truth lingered. Joan's greatest performance may have been in her own living room. Number 7. Ava Gardner, the studio's silent abortion scandal. The studio lights adored her, but behind the velvet curtains, doctors worked in silence. Ava Gardner, the smoldering beauty of The Killers, 1946, and Showboat, 1951, lived her life under MGM's unyielding control. To the public, she was the epitome of glamour. In private, she was a woman stripped of choice, her most personal decisions dictated not by love, but by contracts and studio executives. By the early 1950s, Gardner's face was on every magazine cover. She was Frank Sinatra's tempestuous wife, Howard Hughes's obsession, and MGM's untouchable siren. But her whirlwind romances carried consequences the studio would never allow to see daylight. Gossip swirled that Gardner had conceived more than once during her affairs, only to be forced into quiet procedures designed to preserve her marketability. In those years, an unmarried pregnancy was seen as career suicide, and MGM's publicity department moved with surgical precision to keep its stars pure in the public eye. The most infamous whispers tied to her stormy marriage with Sinatra. Their union was a tabloid feast, fights in hotel lobbies, reconciliations splashed across headlines. Yet, away from the cameras, Gardner allegedly endured multiple terminated pregnancies. In her later years, she would admit in interviews with a tragic frankness, "MGM had all the doctors. If I got pregnant, it was taken care of." Those 5 words carried the weight of 1,000 silences, exposing how the studio system treated women not as artists, but as investments to be managed. The cost of secrecy was heavy. Gardner never had children, and though she remained one of Hollywood's most desirable women, her private grief haunted her into old age. Fans remembered the glittering gowns, the sultry stare, the laughter spilling out of nightclubs. But in Ava's quiet moments, there was an emptiness she could never escape. Hollywood sold her as a goddess, untouched by scandal. The truth was that her body bore the hidden scars of decisions she never truly controlled. Ava Gardner's beauty lit up the golden age, but the price of that perfection was a silence she carried to her grave. Number 8. Spencer Tracy, the double life of a devout star. He prayed in the mornings and betrayed his vows by nightfall. Spencer Tracy, the gruff everyman of Boys Town, 1938, and Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, 1967, lived a life torn between the pulpit and the shadows. To the public, he was Hollywood's Catholic conscience, the moral compass of MGM. But behind the rosaries and whispered confessions was a man whose private life contradicted every sermon he claimed to honor. By the late 1930s, Tracy was untouchable. His rugged performances had made him one of the first actors to win back-to-back Oscars, and Louis B. Mayer paraded him as MGM's good Irish son. He remained legally married to Louise Treadwell, a loyal wife who stood by him even as their union crumbled under the weight of silence and his absences. What few fans knew, however, was that Tracy lived most of his adult life in a clandestine arrangement, a devout Catholic who refused divorce, yet a man who built a decades-long partnership with fellow star Katharine Hepburn. Hepburn was no secret in Hollywood's back rooms. Studio insiders called her Mrs. Tracy in hushed tones, Though never in print, theirs was a romance hidden in plain sight, tucked behind discreet hotel lobbies and studio gates. But Hepburn wasn't the only whisper. Scattered accounts spoke of affairs, of sudden pregnancies that disappeared from gossip pages as quickly as they appeared. The strict hand of the church, and the even stricter control of MGM, ensured that no love child scandal would stain the bankable star. The irony was merciless. Tracy, the man who played priests, judges, and moral heroes, lived in torment over the duplicity of his own existence. He drank heavily to dull the guilt, battled personal demons, and begged priests for absolution, only to return again to Hepburn's arms. For nearly 30 years, the two lived in the tension between devotion and betrayal. When Tracy died in 1967, Hepburn was at his side, though she never attended his funeral, respecting the presence of his wife and family. Hollywood mourned the noble actor who embodied virtue on screen. Yet the truth lingered in silence. Spencer Tracy's greatest role was not in a film, but in a double life he could never reconcile. Number 9. Lana Turner, the starlet who hid more than love. The headlines told one story. A glamorous starlet, a mobster lover, and a crime scene splashed across front pages in 1958. But beneath the neon glare of scandal, Lana Turner carried secrets far more delicate than a courtroom could reveal. Hollywood knew her as the sweater girl who set the screen ablaze in The Postman Always Rings Twice, 1946. What the public didn't see were the pregnancies hushed up, the studio-arranged procedures, and the whispers that Turner had hidden more than love throughout her turbulent reign at MGM. By the mid-1940s, Turner was one of Louis B. Mayer's most prized stars. Her porcelain face sold tickets, her tumultuous romances sold newspapers. She married 7 times. Band leaders, actors, businessmen, each union feeding the gossip columns. But some affairs could never be made public. Rumors swirled of studio-arranged trips whenever Turner found herself expecting at the wrong time, with the wrong man. In an era when unwed motherhood could end a career, MGM stepped in to silence what could not be shown on screen. The darkest chapter came with her relationship to mobster Johnny Stompanato. Their violent affair dominated the press, culminating in the infamous night when Turner's teenage daughter Cheryl killed him in what was ruled self-defense. The trial riveted America, but behind that tragedy was another silence. Whispers that Turner had endured hidden pregnancies and quiet procedures in earlier years, each one erasing a life the studio deemed too dangerous for its marquee star. Hollywood sold her as a goddess of passion, a woman men destroyed themselves to possess. But those who looked closer saw a fragile figure, a star who wept between takes, who hid behind contracts and carefully staged interviews. Turner's on-screen femme fatale image came at the cost of a private life managed by gossip columnists and studio fixers. She gave audiences desire, glamour, and scandal. What she could not give, or was never allowed to keep, were the children whispered about in the shadows. Lana Turner burned bright on the silver screen, but her most haunting role was lived off-camera, a woman forced to hide her heartbreak behind Hollywood's most dazzling smile. Number 10. Loretta Young and Tyrone Power. A second secret? She was already known for one hidden child, but whispers in Hollywood claimed there may have been another. A romance with the swashbuckling Tyrone Power that left behind a mystery Loretta Young never dared put to paper. The saint of the silver screen, who had carefully concealed her daughter with Clark Gable, now faced speculation that her immaculate image was built on a second silence. In the late 1930s, Tyrone Power was 20th Century Fox's golden boy, handsome, charismatic, the leading man of Alexander's Ragtime Band, 1938, and Blood and Sand, 1941. His magnetism was impossible to ignore, and in Hollywood's insular circles, it was common knowledge that he and Loretta shared more than a few stolen evenings. The Catholic actress, so careful to guard her reputation, was seen slipping quietly into his orbit. Gossip columnists like Luella Parsons hinted at friendships that went further than studio-approved publicity suggested. What fueled the fire were the uncanny similarities noted years later between Power and a young woman said to be connected to Loretta's household. Rumors spread that, just as she had done with Judy Lewis, her secret child with Gable, Loretta may have orchestrated another discreet arrangement to avoid scandal. No adoption papers ever surfaced. No official records confirmed it. But insiders swore the story was whispered in the smoky backrooms of MGM, where executives knew how to bury more than just film reels. For Tyrone, the whispers fit the pattern. His life was a carousel of romances, many leaving speculation of children never publicly claimed. For Loretta, the alleged affair carried the same weight of shame and silence she endured after her first hidden pregnancy. If true, the bond between two of Hollywood's most beautiful stars was scrubbed from history before it could ever be acknowledged. Loretta Young died revered for her elegance, and Tyrone Power passed young, collapsing on set in 1958. The possible child, if she ever existed, was left as one of Hollywood's best-kept mysteries. In the end, the saintly star and the matinee idol shared more than fame. They shared a rumor too dangerous to confirm, too haunting to erase. Number 11. Judy Garland, the girl they controlled. She wasn't just a child star, she was property. In the 1940s, while audiences adored Judy Garland's voice in Meet Me in St. Louis, 1944, and still wept for her as Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz, 1939, MGM executives controlled her every breath. Contracts dictated when she slept, what she ate, and even whether she could carry a child. Garland's life became a stage-managed performance, one where whispered pregnancies were erased before they could ever blossom into a scandal. From the moment she became Louis B. Mayer's prize, Garland was placed under brutal regimens. Pills to wake her, pills to sleep, endless rehearsals that left her trembling under stage lights, but the control extended beyond her career. When Judy became pregnant in the 1940s, the studio panicked. A single starlet with a child would tarnish her image as America's eternal girl next door. Quietly, doctors were summoned, and the problem was handled. Garland herself would later allude to it with heartbreaking clarity, admitting that she was never given the chance to make the choice for herself. Her marriages offered no sanctuary. With band leader David Rose, director Vincente Minnelli, and later producer Sid Luft, Judy longed for stability, for the family she had been denied. She did eventually have children, Liza Minnelli, Lorna Luft, and Joey Luft, but only after years of alleged procedures and cover-ups forced on her by the studio system. By then, she carried scars not only from the pressure of fame, but from the erasure of pregnancies she was never allowed to acknowledge. The greatest irony was that audiences adored Garland precisely for her vulnerability, the quiver in her voice, the wide-eyed innocence that promised hope. Yet behind the curtain, she was treated as little more than a commodity, her body policed for profit. When she sang "Somewhere Over the Rainbow," millions believed it. But the rainbow in Judy's own life was painted over by studio hands that valued contracts more than children. Hollywood made Judy Garland immortal, but it also stole from her the one role she longed to play without interference, that of a mother, on her own terms. Number 12. Rita Hayworth, the cover girl with a covered-up past. The poster promised perfection. Rita Hayworth, draped in satin, a smile that could melt steel. But off the glossy magazine covers, she carried secrets the studio system fought to bury. Hollywood's most desired woman, the love goddess of the 1940s, was less in control of her life than the men who managed her contracts, her body, and even the fate of her children. By the time Gilda, 1946, lit up the screen, Hayworth was a global phenomenon. Her image was painted on bomber planes during World War II. Soldiers tucked her pin-up into their helmets, and Columbia Pictures proudly sold her as the ultimate fantasy. Yet, behind the allure was a woman trapped in marriages that fueled scandal. Her union with Orson Welles was stormy, riddled with betrayal and heartbreak. Later, her whirlwind marriage to Prince Ali Khan made headlines across continents, but it also sparked rumors of pregnancies the studios worked furiously to cover. In an era when a starlet's image meant everything, a child born at the wrong time could dismantle an empire. There were whispers of procedures quietly arranged, of children hidden or lost in the shuffle of scandal management. When Hayworth finally became a mother, it was under circumstances that made headlines around the world. With Ali Khan, she gave birth to Princess Yasmin in 1949, a child caught between Hollywood glamour and European aristocracy. But even that joy was shadowed by bitterness, a custody battle that splashed across tabloids, forcing Hayworth to fight in courtrooms as fiercely as she had ever fought on screen. Through it all, the studios worked overtime to polish her image. Columbia printed photos of Rita cradling Yasmin like a fairy tale princess, while quietly erasing the private sorrows that came before. To the public, she was radiant. To insiders, she was another woman forced to silence her own story. Number 13. Marilyn Monroe, the baby they never let her have. The world adored her curves, her whispers, her champagne laugh. But what Marilyn Monroe wanted most, a child to call her own, was the one role Hollywood never let her play. Behind the diamonds and studio lights, the blonde bombshell endured whispered pregnancies, heartbreaking losses, and rumors of babies silenced before they could ever see daylight. By the early 1950s, Marilyn was the hottest property at 20th Century Fox. Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, 1953, made her a global fantasy, while gossip columnists linked her to baseball legend Joe DiMaggio and playwright Arthur Miller. To the press, her life was a carousel of fame and desire, but to those who knew her, it was a tragedy of missed motherhood. More than once, Monroe was said to have been pregnant, only for the stories to vanish in a haze of studio management and hospital corridors. Her marriage to DiMaggio was a war between tenderness and jealousy. Friends later recalled that she longed for a child during that brief union, but nothing lasted long enough for stability. With Arthur Miller, she hoped again, retreating from Hollywood's glare to build a quieter life. But that dream collapsed too. Reports swirled of miscarriages, of hospital stays brushed off as illness, and of procedures carried out in silence to protect her fragile image. Even her most dangerous affairs carried whispers of what might have been. Rumors linked her to the Kennedy brothers, stories too explosive for the press to print openly in the early 1960s. Was there a secret child? A hidden pregnancy brushed away by men more powerful than any studio boss? No record confirms it, but the speculation remains one of Hollywood's most haunting, unanswered questions. In the end, Marilyn Monroe belonged to the world, but never to a family of her own. She gave us Some Like It Hot, 1959, The 7-Year Itch, 1955, and the unforgettable image of a white dress billowing over a subway grate. Yet the role she desired most, mother, was the only one she was never allowed to keep. Number 14. Jean Harlow, the Platinum Blonde's silent scandal. The camera adored her, but the studios feared her secrets. Jean Harlow, the original Platinum Blonde, lit up the screen in Hell's Angels, 1930, and Dinner at 8, 1933. To Depression-era audiences, she was the embodiment of glamour. Yet beneath the laughter and sequined gowns lay rumors of pregnancies erased, children who never saw daylight, and a private life haunted by silence. By the early 1930s, MGM had transformed Harlow into a sensation. Her peroxide hair was imitated by millions of women. Her risque one-liners scandalized censors, and Clark Gable called her the best co-star he ever had. But away from the screen, she was no laughing matter. At just 16, Harlow had been married off in haste. A union quickly dissolved, yet insiders claimed it left behind whispers of a hidden pregnancy. managed quietly before she ever became a star. Later, during her Hollywood ascent, gossip columnists speculated again about quiet absences. Times when Harlow disappeared only to return thinner, paler, and even more determined to smile on cue. Her marriages only deepened the shadows. With MGM producer Paul Byrne, she entered what seemed a fairy tale romance, only for tragedy to strike when he was found dead under circumstances the studio called mysterious. Whispers soon spread that Harlow had confided in friends about another pregnancy, one hushed up by the same MGM handlers who managed her every move. The studios had invested too much in their baby to risk the scandal of an unplanned child. By 1937, Harlow was still in her 20s, but worn down by the demands of fame and the secrets she was forced to carry. She collapsed on the set of Saratoga, her final film, and within days, she was gone, dead at just 26. MGM rushed to finish the picture using doubles, preserving her image as forever young, forever radiant. Number 15. Orson Welles, the genius who left shadows. He rewrote cinema with Citizen Kane, 1941, but his private life was a puzzle of shadows and unanswered questions. Orson Welles, the boy wonder who terrified America with his War of the Worlds broadcast, lived a life littered with half-truths, affairs, and rumors of children he never claimed. Among them was one of Hollywood's longest-running whispers that acclaimed director Michael Lindsay Hogg might have been Welles's unacknowledged son. By the mid-1940s, Welles was both celebrated and condemned. RKO had given him the keys to the kingdom, and in return, he gave them brilliance and chaos. His marriage to Rita Hayworth, the love goddess of Columbia Pictures, ended in scandal, a clash between her aching need for stability and his hunger for freedom. Welles drifted from continent to continent, leaving behind unfinished films, unpaid bills, and broken relationships. And through it all, whispers followed him. Women who claimed they carried his child. Rumors of offspring scattered across Europe and Hollywood alike. The most enduring rumor came years later. British director Michael Lindsay Hogg, raised as the son of actress Geraldine Fitzgerald, bore a striking resemblance to Welles. Hollywood insiders noticed the chin, the voice, the flamboyant ego. Even gossip columnists speculated that Welles had fathered him during a secret affair. Welles himself never confirmed it, and Lindsay Hogg long dismissed the rumors as painful speculation. But the resemblance kept the whispers alive, turning a private question into one of cinema's most enduring mysteries. For Welles, scandal was almost second nature. He thrived in shadows, manipulating light on screen, manipulating truth off it. He built myths as easily as he destroyed reputations, even his own. And if children were left behind in the wake of his restless genius, Hollywood looked the other way, just as it did with so many of its male titans. Number 16. Elizabeth Taylor, the love goddess with a hidden legacy. She was the most photographed woman in the world, her violet eyes mesmerizing audiences from National Velvet, 1944, to Cleopatra, 1963. Yet even Elizabeth Taylor, Hollywood's most public star, carried whispers of a secret life. Beyond the diamonds, the marriages, and the tabloid headlines, rumors swirled that Taylor may have left behind a hidden child, a legacy carefully buried beneath the spectacle of her fame. By the 1950s, Taylor's beauty was already legend. MGM showcased her as the perfect ingenue, then the perfect wife, pairing her with co-stars like Montgomery Clift and Rock Hudson. Off-screen, she lived as wildly as the characters she portrayed. 8 marriages, to names like Richard Burton, Eddie Fisher, and Mike Todd, ensured her private life was never far from the front page. But for all the headlines, there were silences too. Absences from the screen explained away as exhaustion, sudden retreats that fueled speculation of pregnancies the studio suppressed. The most persistent rumor placed Taylor in Ireland in the early 1960s, supposedly to recover from illness. Insiders whispered it was no illness at all, but a pregnancy carried in secret. The child quietly placed beyond the reach of tabloids. No proof ever surfaced. No adoption records unearthed. Yet Hollywood thrived on such whispers, and Taylor's name was never free of them. Ironically, Taylor was fiercely maternal to the children she did raise. She became a doting mother to 4, balancing motherhood with the glare of the cameras. Yet her name remained tied to speculation of children, denied by studio pressure or hidden by circumstance. Whether true or not, the rumors added to her aura of tragedy. A woman adored by millions, yet denied peace in the most private parts of her life. Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, remembered for her beauty, her philanthropy, and her tempestuous romances. But for all her jewels and all her Oscars, one question lingers in the smoky corridors of old Hollywood. Did the love goddess leave behind a hidden heir? Hollywood crowned her its eternal queen. But queens, too, can leave behind mysteries they never meant to reveal. Number 17. John Huston, the director who raised another man's child. The man who gave Hollywood The Maltese Falcon, 1941, and The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, 1948, built his reputation on grit and shadows. But off-screen, John Huston lived a private drama, just as tangled as his films. He raised a daughter he loved deeply, yet she was not his own by blood. In a town where paternity scandals could ruin a career, Huston's choice was both noble and quietly scandalous. He stepped into a role most men of his era would have fled. By the 1950s, Huston was as famous for his films as for his roaring, restless lifestyle. He boxed, hunted, drank, and romanced with the same appetite that drove his art. His marriages were as chaotic as his shoots, 5 in total, each leaving behind stories whispered in Hollywood clubs. But the most striking chapter came when his 4th wife, ballet dancer Enrica Soma, gave birth in 1959. The child, Allegra, was rumored not to be his. The gossip spread quickly through Hollywood's cocktail circuits. Allegra was the daughter of British historian John Julius Norwich, the product of an affair Soma had during her marriage to Huston. In an industry that fed on such whispers, the revelation could have humiliated the Oscar-winning director. Yet Huston, instead of disowning the child, embraced her as his own. He brought Allegra into his household, raised her beside his other children, and gave her his name, never publicly acknowledging the scandal. To outsiders, Huston's choice was both baffling and heroic. Some saw it as an act of pride, a refusal to admit betrayal. Others saw tenderness, a man protecting an innocent child from the same cruelty that had scarred countless others in Hollywood's hidden histories. Allegra herself would later describe him as a father in every sense, regardless of blood. John Huston spent his life crafting legends on screen, shaping Bogart, Hepburn, and Monroe into cinematic myths. But his quietest role, raising a daughter who wasn't his, revealed more about his character than any camera could capture. Hollywood remembered him as a master of shadows, yet his most human legacy was a truth he kept lit in the open, even when everyone else whispered. Hollywood's golden glow hid shadows of secrets, heartbreak, and lives rewritten by studios. These scandals remind us that behind every legend was a human story, buried in silence. Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more untold Hollywood truths the studios never wanted remembered.